it.
Oh, good, sure.
It's a eraser thing.
I got a marker.
Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started. I'd like to call to order tonight's business meeting for Monday, November 14th, 2022. And at this time, please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So nice to hear student voices joining us in the pledge. Thank you for that. Okay, for a roll call this evening, all directors and the student representative are present. Next, we have our open forum, and I'll just introduce our norms for open forum. At least 10 minutes prior to each meeting, a sign-up sheet is available at the meeting for individuals to sign up to address the board. Only those whose names and addresses appear on the sign-up sheet at the time of the meeting is called to order shall be permitted to address the board. Up to 5 speakers are provided a maximum of 3 minutes each to address the board. Speakers will not be allowed to verbally attack, disparage, or potentially defame individual board members, employees, or students, nor may speakers use vulgar or profane language. Also, speakers may be precluded from disclosing personally identifiable private data regarding employees or students. Speakers unwilling to conform to the rules or time constraints may be told his or her privilege of speaking has ended. Board members shall listen respectfully to issues brought to them by the community, but not engage the individuals during their time. The board shall not deliberate or take action during the open forum regarding an issue presented. If follow-up by administration is necessary, the chair shall request the superintendent to follow up on the matter. And when the board chair proceeds with the meeting, audience comments are no longer in order. However, the board members retain the right to call on district administrators for information to assist the board in its deliberations. We have one speaker tonight, and so I'll ask Julie Miller to come forward, please.
Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. My name is Julie Miller, and I'm an early childhood secretary. I'm also a member of the Prior Lake Savage Secretaries Federation, Local 4887, who has recently adopted a new logo inspired by our own Dr. Thomas. At our Professional Development Day in October, Dr. Thomas referred to PLSAS secretaries as the anchor of the district. What could be a better symbol for PLSAS secretaries than that? The anchor is an object used to secure another object in its place, or is a base of both stability and security. A ship drops its anchor, which grounds and stabilizes itself from the waves, tides, or currents, preventing it from drifting away. This is something that PLSAS secretaries do on a daily basis. We provide support to all stakeholders, and we do so with strength, grace, and a steadfastness that is unmatched, even when things are changing or shifting. The anchor is also a symbol for embarking on a new journey. The same way a ship pulls its anchor from the water to set sail, PLSAS secretaries lead the charge when a new journey is brought forth. In addition to our logo, the quote, "The anchor holds in spite of the storm," is a direct representation of the stability that PLSAS secretaries provide the district on a daily basis. The storm refers not only to the recent pandemic or racial incidences, but the daily storms we weather every single day. It is everything from problem-solving staff absences, assisting with new technologies, and jumping in when an extra pair of hands is needed. Our determination, calm presence, and friendly demeanor holds firm no matter the storm. We are here tonight as a local because PLSAS secretaries have been working 135 days without a current contract. Our current negotiations with the district have stalled, in part due to district negotiators telling us that they cannot give PLSAS secretaries a salary counteroffer because of the board's limiting parameters. PLSAS secretaries are here tonight asking you as a board to expand those parameters. Give district negotiators the green light to negotiate a contract that respects honors, and values our work. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Julie. All right, next up this evening, I will call for a motion to approve our agenda as listed.
So made.
By Stacy. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Enrique. Any comments or questions? All right, all in favor of approving this evening's agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries 7-0. Next up is the consent agenda, and I'll take a motion at the end. Consent agenda items are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless board members so request, in which event an item will be removed from the consent agenda item and addressed. On this evening's consent agenda, under financials, we have check wire transfer disbursement summary, the wire transfer, EFT and ACH banking activity, the bank reconciliation statement for September 2022, the PMA financial, the monthly wire detail, the monthly health and dental wire detail, the monthly check detail, and the monthly ACH detail. We also have the monthly enrollment report, the approval of the school board minutes as follows: the regular board meeting of October 10th, the board professional development session on October 24th, and the study session on October 24th. And under personnel items, candidates for employment as listed, resignations, terminations, non-renewals as listed in your packet, and leaves of absence as listed in your packet. Also, the ISD 719 organizational chart and the assurance of compliance report. Can I have a motion to approve this evening's consent agenda?
So made.
By Amy. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Jonathan. Any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That carries 7-0. Thank you. Next up this evening, we have our resolution for the acceptance of gifts. And this evening, we'll be asking the board to approve gifts from the Westwood PTC, which raised funds for a third grade field trip at Westwood Elementary and Sage Academy, an anonymous donation of $200 in gift cards for PLSAS schools, and a donation in kind of office chairs valued at $2,400 for Glendale Elementary by Laura Schwably. Am I saying that correctly? We're going, okay, great. I'll take a motion in a second, and then it's a roll call vote. Could I have a motion to accept this evening's donations?
So made.
By Mary, second by Enrique. Okay, any comments or questions? All right, roll call. Jonathan?
Yes.
Enrique?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Stacy?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
Aye. That carries 7-0 this evening. Thank you very much. All right. Next, we have our Laker Pride and Special Recognition, and I will turn it over to Dr. Thomas.
Thank you so much, Chair Nelson and other board directors. Tonight, we've got a real special treat for you. Every month every business meeting, I would like to showcase one of our schools so that our board and our community gets an understanding of what's happening in our schools. Not only are you going to hear from our students themselves, but also how this work aligns to their declared priorities and goals, which ultimately feed up to our district and board priorities as well. And so tonight, under the leadership of Principal Katie Schumann, she will come forward and engage the board and our community on an update with regards to Five Hawks Elementary School. And no pressure, but I've been waiting for this for about 3 weeks. And I'm super excited, and it's always great to have our students. Ms. Schumann, I do have a microphone too, if you need it. If you need to pass it.
All right, as Dr. Thomas said, I am Katie Sherman, and I am the principal at Five Hawks, and I have third graders with us this evening. Third graders, can you line up here and look at the people out in the crowd? We'll get an introduction. Can you tell us your first and last name, please?
Estella, Crosby Angela, Owen Lindell, Quinn Mathis, Miles Bodette, Olivia Francis.
And they are here tonight to teach our school board members a foundations demonstration lesson. So, third graders, why don't you go disperse yourselves? We think you're going to need some help this evening, so they will help you when they aren't actually presenting. Why don't you go find a spot to stand in between two board members while I get our classroom ready? And you can put your boards down right next to the adults next to you. So adults, perhaps you would clear some space for them as well. We're highlighting foundations this evening because it is a key component to a balanced literacy program. At 5 Hawks, one of our primary goals is to raise the reading proficiency of all of our students as measured by the FastBridge Learning Suite of assessments. And a key component is word work. Foundations is a word work curriculum, and it teaches phonics, it teaches phonemic awareness, it teaches fluency and vocabulary, high frequency word study, handwriting and spelling. It is comprehensive, it is systematic, and it is multisensory. The students that are with us today have been learning foundations since first grade, so they are really well positioned to be your teachers this evening. You do have some of your own materials in front of you, but please follow the instructions of your third grade teachers to know what to do with those. So, Crosby, do you want to kick us off? And I'll hold the microphone so everybody can hear you.
We are going to drill our short vowel sounds. I say and then repeat after me. A apple A.
A apple A.
E ed E.
E ed E.
I itch I.
I itch it.
O octaves A.
O octaves A.
U up A.
U up A.
Thanks.
Echo, who lets you know when you are to echo back what the teacher is telling you.
Now we will drill our digraphs in one trigraph. Remember, a digraph is 2 letters that make one sound. WH whistle W.
WH whistle W.
CH chin.
CH chin ch.
SH ship sh.
SH ship sh.
Thumb.
TH thumb.
CK suck.
CK suck.
And now we will drill our trigraph. A trigraph is 3 letters.
TCH catch.
Now we will drill our glued sounds. A glued sound is 2 or 3 letters that make A-L, ball, all.
A-L, ball, all.
A-M, ham, am.
A-M, ham, am.
A-N,
A-N, fam, am.
These are irregular glued sounds. Okay. They do not follow the rules. Most ILD, wild,
ILD, wild, isled.
IND, fine,
IND, find,
OLD, cold, old.
OLD, cold, old.
OLT, cold.
OLT, cold, old. OST, post, ost.
While Olivia is coming up to the podium, you are welcome to take your magnetic board out of your folder. Third graders, you might have to help our school board students.
Spelling the word pitch.
Pitch.
Oh, how exciting.
And you need those.
These two? Okay, is this a eraser?
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yep, you need your markers and your erasers.
You're going to help us if
Markers
we
and
get
erasers?
stuck?
Markers and erasers
Got
too.
it.
This will be hard.
Kind of
Okay,
heavy.
this is hard.
Oh, yeah.
Not really.
It's not really heavy. Okay. Seems heavy.
I know. So good.
Rapid fire. You're good at this.
Today we are going to be spelling the word pitch. Repeat after me. Pitch.
Pitch.
Elbows up.
So you want to bring your elbows up and you want to make the sound.
Pitch.
The word with your tiles.
Okay.
P.
Okay.
Do we move it over here?
Yep. Move to the open space.
Yeah.
This is the vowel.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, very
Where's my
good. Different color.
And then you said
Yeah, CH.
CH because it's a shorter way to do it and it's a diagram. Yep, that's it. You gotta click the C.
Oh, okay.
Oh, let me.
I was gonna say, maybe they changed the way they used to spell it.
Oh, that pitch.
Here's some learning going on.
Oh, that's TCH too.
Yeah.
You don't want to get that TCH. You don't want to get the TCH.
Don't we?
Nothing
That's
in
what
front
she
of the
put up
vowel.
there.
So like,
Yeah, I think
oh
it's
wait,
TCH.
never mind. Sorry. Then let's just
So
say
we're
there's like
good.
something after this, then it would be CH. But if it's just I, there's nothing behind it, then it's TCH. Because I just realized this comes after the I and the TCH.
It's good.
Your letters when I spell it.
Yes, give me 5.
P-I-T-C-H. So this will be hard.
Okay.
Now, make a scoop. Make a scoop.
You throw us both.
Swoop like this. Swoop it.
Like a smile.
The underneath. Yeah, like a smile.
Swoop to the
The
eye.
P to the I.
And is
Oh,
this
swoop
a
all like that.
Consonants in the vowel.
now you want to
Yeah.
because it's a short. Put a breve, aka a mini smiley face. You want to put a breve.
A little smiley face?
Yeah, because it's a short vowel.
This has changed since I've been in
Oh my
school.
gosh, that was hard. You're right.
Put a what?
C under here because it's a closed syllable.
Okay.
Olivia tell you what it should look like.
Then you put that means it's
You have a breve above the I. Underline the TCH. And put a swoop with a C underneath the word because it is closed syllable.
Close.
It's like if there's a vowel at the end of the word, it's
Where are we base?
just space it.
Any side?
It might stain the board a bit.
Here. Red works.
Can something like that.
All right.
If you want to see mine, I haven't done this for a while, so it won't look good. I gotta like read
If you use it more than I do.
When do you start this?
All right, what's
What grade?
grade.
First grade. Okay.
Put the letters back.
Just put it back. Listen, I'm gonna move this one.
I-T-C-H.
Spell that.
Because it's in, it's in normal order.
And I know it's kind of just like spell it back.
These look hard over here.
No.
Repeat after me. Crash.
Crash.
Elbows up. Crash. Build the word.
You want to build the word?
Okay.
All right. Spell crash.
Where's my R?
Still crash.
Do I do the ASH? Oh, no, AA.
Do I do the sh sound?
Things.
Because
You
the
did.
vowels, like they make the vowels this color, so it's the sound.
So now
Mark it up.
So now
Mark it up.
Same thing, but
We do our thing again.
underline
Yeah.
Underscore thing.
and then you have a blend
See,
here,
'cause it's
so then you want-
closed.
So then you want to underline the letters. You want to underline the letters together, not together, not
not
together.
together.
Is this split them up?
That's a vowel.
Because then it'd be.
So what's that little
Oh,
thing?
circle.
A
Okay.
breve? Like that? Or that's a check mark. I guess I didn't do that very good. I'm gonna rest
And then do I do
How's
this?
yours look?
Yep.
And then do I do the big thing?
We'll tell you what it should look like.
And underline that.
Sorry, Giada will.
You want to do a line?
Underline the C and the R separately because it is a blend. Make sure you underline the SH because it is a digraph. Let's scoop the word. It is a one-syllable word. Put a breve over the A because it is a short A. Put a C under the scoop because it is a closed syllable. Erase the marks.
Wow.
Wow.
Sometimes it's going to be a little harder one. Because sometimes it will be like sometimes it's
You're not
going to
teasing
be
us,
like
right?
a even vowel in a second because
Okay.
we don't even use spelling.
Well, I mean, not too bad. but-
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think I need some help, obviously.
Yeah, it's coming.
It will come. It'll come. It's probably gonna happen this year.
All right,
Will
what's
these
gonna be
always
the
go
word
back in
now?
the same spots?
Yep.
Spell it back.
These are always here and they're always like this.
Well,
Now you're gonna learn something new about this.
something
that
new.
he's gonna-
Okay.
that he's gonna Tricky. Next word is blind. Repeat after me. Blind.
Blind.
Goes up.
Blind.
Tapped with 3 fingers on I and D because it is a glued sound.
Oh.
Glued sounds like these glued things.
What's it called? What was the thing?
Glued sound.
Glued? Glued? Like glue? Like.
Yeah, now spell blind.
Okay.
Oh, find.
Find.
I gotta get my ears checked.
This for
I need an elbow. I need an elbow. Oh no, what's the difference?
My bad is yeah.
What's it called?
See, I just trust the teacher.
what the
Why
letters
not?
are.
That could mess somebody up.
Yeah.
No, you gotta script
Okay. Oh wait, no, now I gotta do the
Touch the
iron.
letters to make sure you
Come
have
on.
the right
But you
ones.
want to
Separate?
separate that.
It's a what?
In like this?
IND.
Yep.
Mark it up.
Because you want to mark it up. So
Now I gotta do my
yep.
one.
Swoop.
Face like
Now
this?
you want to box the IND because it's a glued sound.
Box. I draw a box.
Box it.
Above it?
Box it, and now see the I. You want to draw a straight line right above the I. After the box. After the line above the I.
To make it long sound.
But
And
now
then,
see that?
yeah.
It's not a closed syllable.
Here, you do it.
Why is it box?
You want to cross out.
Oh, that kind.
Oh, I see.
Cross out. There you go.
Oh my god.
Is that a blend? Actually, is that a blend? This isn't like it's.
Miles is ready to tell you what your markup should look like.
Wow.
Yes, complicated.
You did.
A crown above the I because it makes a long I sound.
Okay.
Box the I and D because it's a glued sound. Underline the BL with 2 separate lines because it's a blend. Scoop the word. Put a C under it with an X because the word is a closed syllable exception.
The I says
Erase it.
Wow. It's an exception to close?
because I this here where the I says I.
Oh.
Words back and
Wow.
exceptions are pretty easy actually.
Are they? Okay, well, did this help you?
Oh wait, you're
No.
not supposed to.
Oh, I'm not
For
supposed to
the
do that?
advanced class.
No, it's not.
We're not supposed to do that?
My class.
Sorry. Am I supposed to erase?
Well,
I gotta
you're the
erase.
advanced
Okay,
class I'm
sorry.
talking about.
I have to follow the rules. I'm not a good rule follower.
AIM wants to give you a little bit of an idea of how systematic and comprehensive the program is, and that's what our students do in kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, and 3rd grade for 30 minutes a day. So the test will be later this week, and we'll come back for that. But no, thank you for participating in our lesson tonight. We hope it gives you a sense of what we're doing in our classrooms each day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Cool. It might have been on. Look for yourself on TV now. You can watch yourself. Because we're all recorded right there's on camera.
I don't think it's on TV.
Oh, yeah, you can. You'll be on YouTube.
Like three? What kind of books do you like?
Principal Schumann, we've got,
I think we give, yeah, their label with numbers. So I think they, yeah.
I'll wait till she comes back.
I'm slow.
So, in recognition, we also want to do a group picture of all the students and you as well. But in recognition for all the work that our students were, maybe our student teachers were sharing with us tonight, we have certificates honoring them. And after tonight, maybe they should be contracts because we need teachers. Are you all ready to go to become teachers tonight? Not tonight? All right. A few more years? All right. Well, thank you all, and here are the certificates. I'll let you pass those to all the students, and then if we can get a group picture.
Their teachers all were in
Our teachers where are the Five Hawks teachers that were here tonight? Are any of them still here? Did they sneak away?
Okay.
Bring him in.
Want us to stay here or exit to take
Sorry,
photos?
right up here in the front. That'd be great. And then show your certificates.
They're coming off. They don't want to be in the camera. Oh, here's the
Here comes the
teacher.
teachers. There they go. Come forward. Come forward.
I think we blurred. Waiting for
So that was just a sample board of what we get to see on a day-to-day basis in our classrooms, and really wanted to emphasize tonight the focus and the importance on our early literacy components of our foundations program. And again, these are students who have had about 3 years worth of experience, and we're seeing some significant changes in their ability to be literate by 3rd grade. So thank you to all of our students, our staff. It's a really great opportunity to showcase, and then how that's been their focus for the year for their school improvement plan as well. So that is our Laker Pride for this evening.
Thank you. It was lovely to see, too, not only that they learn this way, but that they can teach it, and that shows how well they've embraced it. So what an engaging presentation. Thank you to everybody. All right, next up this evening, we will move on to personnel items, and I will turn it to Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Nelson, Board of Directors. I will have our Interim Executive Director of Administrative Services, Ms. Emily Herman, share our our personnel items for this evening.
Yes, thank you, Board, members of the Board, Dr. Thomas. The first one for 9A is additional staffing for certified. We are bringing forward a request to add 3 additional special education teachers to address the additional student enrollment and student needs in special education center-based programs and a resource program. And the funding for this additional request will come from the general fund.
Okay. Let's take a motion in a second and then open it for questions. Do I have a motion to approve the additional staffing as listed for special education teachers?
So made.
By Mary. Do I have a second? By Julie. Okay, comments or questions this evening? Mary.
Thank you for this, Emily and Tammy. Just a question. Did we have openings that were filling with this, or are these 3 additional on top of our open positions that we already had with our SPED teachers?
Great question. These are 3 additional FTEs for the special education teachers.
Okay. And have we filled all the other ones?
I don't have those numbers off the top of my head right now, but I can look into that.
Thank you.
May I have Michelle come forward?
For special ed.
Yeah.
Good evening. I'm back. The FTE we're asking for, we still do have 1.4 FTE that's been open at the secondary that we haven't been able to fill. The FTE that I'm asking for now is simply due to numbers. Our center-based numbers have exploded, needing the just move-in kids that weren't taken into staffing into account this spring. And for center-based numbers, just getting 4, 5, or 6 new kids is a teacher for center-based programming. And then the split position for resource is Hamilton Ridge and Loyola Del Lago are way out of whack when it comes to how many students we're asking each IEP manager to service and compared to the other elementary schools. So this will bring them in line to the other elementary schools.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the special education teacher request, say aye. 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 Opposed? That carries 7-0 this evening. Thank you. All right. You up again.
To continue on to 9B, additional staffing for non-certified. We have 3 separate requests we're bringing forward to this evening. One is for a restructure in the finance office to reduce the accounts payable specialist position and add a senior accountant position. The increase in the cost will come from the general fund. The second is the American Indian Services Coordinator. This will be a neutral cost. As you may remember from the September 12th board meeting, it was requested to change this position into 2 culture liaisons. We're now asking, based off of continued program review and staffing, to convert it back to the 1.0 FTE for the American Indian Services Coordinator position. The third is an Emergency Management Safety Coordinator. With this restructure request with the reduction in the emergency plans coordinator position, adding this position to manage the growing demands of emergency management and safety throughout the district to align with the district's strategic priorities for a safe, secure, and supportive environment. This additional staffing request would also come from the general fund.
All right, why don't we start on this one with questions, since there's 3 different asks in there before I take a motion. Comments or questions this evening? Jonathan.
Can you walk through process with the going back to 1 from 2? And I'm assuming we had an engagement with APAC.
Yes, Director Drews, I'll take that unless Sam is in here. But the conversation that we've had with APAC, we had a conversation earlier this year to look at bringing liaison support that would be more programmatic support, directly more at the student level. We had those positions posted, and unfortunately, they remained open. And in recent conversations with APAC, the conversation is, well, perhaps we then go back to having a coordinator. Maybe that will attract an individual that might be more competitive in the industry right now in terms of the rates and things of that nature. And so they agreed to go back to a coordinator to see if we can get somebody in there to help with the work to supporting APAC. So that is in support of the group.
And have we identified that person?
No, we would go forward and, and post for that.
Okay.
Other comments or questions on this item? Mary.
First of all, I know I already asked a question about the Emergency Management Safety Coordinator, and I appreciate the response. The only qualifying thing that I didn't quite understand is since we're hiring a brand new full-time person for this, is the amount here, is that a differential, or is that just the amount for the full-time coordinator?
Great question. It's taking the full cost for the differential between the salary and benefits for both positions and the difference between the 2.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments or questions on these items? All right. At this time, I would take a motion to approve the additional staffing for 2022-23 non-certified staff.
So made.
By Mary. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Enrique. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, that carries 7-0 this evening. Thank you. Back to you again, right?
All right. 9C, continuing on with additional staffing requests for co-curricular. Based on the additional enrollment in our dance program, there is a need for to bring back the B Squad winter dance coaches. Both of these positions are funded by the boosters, and so we're bringing forward the request to add these positions back into the budget.
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve additional staffing 2022-23 for co-curricular staff?
So made.
By Amy, second by Enrique. Comments or questions this evening?
So is that adding an actual team, like a additional, or?
Yes, it's my understanding that during the pandemic, there wasn't enough enrollment for that, and so they're bringing back that team based off of the new numbers that are enrolled this year.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? That carries 7-0. And then up to the Child Nutrition Services Agreement, Emily.
So for number 9B, we are bringing forward the request to approve the agreement that was made with the Child Nutrition Services employee group. You can see a breakdown there in the memo of the changes that we're able to make, including an adjustment to the base salary with 1% increase this year, a 1% increase next year, added a certification level for the first level, added some additional steps for middle school and high school, made an enhancement to their wellness initiative to help incentivize presenteeism, and then some additional formatting and language updates. The total compounded percentage increase over the base year equates to 6.125%, and a dollar amount that's $114,775.
Okay, because it's a contract, why don't we start with comments or questions? We're all good? Mary?
I just want to say thank you very much for sending the contract out to the full board. I did get a chance to read it. It's very well done.
Thank you. Anybody else?
If I might ask, if could you clarify maybe, Tammy, I think it might be a little, just use a little explanation of 1 and 1 adding up to 6.
Sure, thank you. In contracts, if they have an automatic step increase, then there is an increase if you move between year and year to increase the step. There is an increase there, so that also counts as part of the total package. And then as we looked at reducing the number of steps in there, it was increasing some of the salary schedule, so we kind of basically redid the base salary schedule to make it getting to the top step quicker. So if you take the entire package year over year, it becomes to the 6%. But that would include, like I say, the steps and then the cost of living increases in the year to year.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, do I have a motion to approve the terms and conditions of employment for the 2022 through 24 Child Nutrition Services Agreement?
So made.
By Mary. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Jonathan. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries 7-0. Thank you. All right. We have no unfinished business this evening, so we will move on to new business. And next up is our final 2021-22 audit report. I'll turn it to Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Nelson, Board of Directors. At our last meeting, we had our auditors come in and walk you through the report of the audit, and nothing has changed since we've had that presentation to the board. But I will turn it over to our Executive Director of Business Services, Ms. Fredrickson, should there be any updates or clarifications that you would need as a board before you take your vote tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, Chair Nelson, board members. We just need an official acceptance of the audit. If there's any questions, like Dr. Thomas said, it didn't change from the presentation that MMKR presented at our study session. We just need you to formally accept the audit. And we will send that to Department of Education and all of the required compliance issues. We have made sure that they're in place, ready to go. Any comments or questions before I ask for a motion?
Go ahead. I would just say a lot of questions were asked when the auditor was here. So if someone's reviewing the tape or members of the public, I would go back to last study session and see all the questions that were asked, because there was a number of them.
Anybody else? My thanks again to the business department and everybody who contributed to his comments that said that you were timely, effective, easy to work with, and we had a great report. So thank you, Tammy, to you and your staff. I appreciate that. At this time, could I take, I would take a motion to formally accept the final 2021-22 audit report.
So made.
Okay, help me on that one. Stacy?
Okay.
And then Enrique. All right, all those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? That carries 7-0. Thank you. All right, next up will be the 719 RFP approval. Dr. Thomas?
Thank you, Chair Nelson, Board of Directors. I will have Mrs. Fredrickson walk us through the RFP process for our collections of resources at various events. With that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. As you know, we sent out an RFP with the hope of getting one vendor to provide services for all of our athletics and all of our fee payment functions. And we did send that RFP to you guys to review. It went out. We got a few responses. We met as a team to look at the RFP, to have further demonstrations from the final choices for the vendors, and we did review those. And what we found out was there is no one vendor to kind of do everything like we had hoped. We kind of all agreed that EduTrack was not working for us. So we, the services that EduTrack provides were actually better served in Infinite Campus. So we're moving all of the resources that we were using for EduTrack onto Infinite Campus. So they'll be doing our online fees and then all of the activities. And then Affinity is what we use for athletics and registration. That's working. We hope that as Infinite Campus makes some more improvements and upgrades and enhancements to their software, that we would be able to discontinue using Affinity and move that to the Infinite Campus platform, but they're not there yet. And then Vanco is the company that online ticketing and point of sale transactions that all the other districts around us are using. So all of the parents that come to athletic events here have to log into a different system to get tickets, but they all have a password for Vanco from the other districts. So we thought it would be, again, advantageous to have Vanco do that because it'll just help all of our parents as they come. But again, as Infinite Campus gets a little more sophisticated and has more enhancements to their software, we can also look at moving Vanco onto Infinite Campus, but that's probably going to be 2-3 years down the road before they're even ready to look at their enhancements. So we're asking for approval essentially to eliminate EduTrack, keep Infinite Campus as our new provider, Vanco as our online ticketing point of sales, and then Affinity would stay the same.
Okay, comments or questions? Mary?
Okay, so I have 3 questions. One, Infinite Campus. Weren't we supposed to upgrade Infinite Campus? And if we haven't done that yet, is that a prerequisite to adding in these additional features?
No, this is kind of a separate track that they have, kind of sort of a separate software, if you will. I mean, ultimately, it would be great once we get everything kind of working together, but we can do this separate for this piece of it.
What is the price difference? And I understand that no one likes EduTrack. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just wondering, since we're adding that additional feature onto Infinite Campus, are we saving money by getting rid of EduTrack to do that piece?
I'd have to get the exact numbers. I don't know off the top of my head. It was slightly more expensive, but it had many more capabilities than what EduTrack was capable of doing. One of the biggest things was some of the reports that we have to get every month to kind of balance the bank accounts. EduTrack was not able to provide that service in a manner that was useful to us. Infinite Campus will be able to do that. So that was a huge advantage. So as we kind of looked at all of the pluses and minuses, every increase is a significant amount, but it wasn't enough to sway us to keep an EduTrack. But I can get you the exact amount.
And my last question is on Vanco. I've got other questions, of course, but these are the top 3. For the online ticketing and point of sale, do we transfer the cost of the credit card transaction back to the individuals buying the tickets?
Yeah, usually as you set your ticket price, you would include all of those peripheral costs that would occur.
Okay, so as far as the tool goes itself, how is the licensing structured on that, since we do pass the administration fees on to the ticket buyer?
I can get you the exact specifics in their RFP that they responded to.
Okay.
I think it was a per transaction.
That's what I was afraid of. Yeah. Okay.
Most of them were the same way for this particular piece. It was usually a per transaction. The differences in the vendors was kind of the base percentage that they just charged overall. The transaction fees were pretty consistent throughout all of the vendors. But again, I'll get you that exact information.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I just want to confirm again, Vanco is also going to be non-athletic events as well, like arts and activities,
yeah,
theater
point of
tickets.
sale,
Yep.
yes.
Great, thank you. Stacy.
And then just from an end user standpoint, is this less, I'm assuming,
less accounts for parents to have to register and have a user and password
Or not
Yes, that's what we're hoping, and eventually, as I said, Infinite Campus is working on a lot of enhancements. It's interesting that there is just no one product that kind of does everything. I wish I was a programmer. I could go explore
but we are
that
getting some
market.
streamlining here with Infinite Campus, it sounds like. Okay.
Other comments or questions? Did you have more, Stacy?
Nope.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. So at this time, I don't know if I have to specifically word it, but we are asking, I take a motion to approve as outlined, the adjustment to our fees and services that we're providing as presented by Director Frederickson. Do I have a motion?
So made.
By Amy, second by Jonathan. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Okay, that carries 7-0. Thank you. All right. Next up, we have American Education Week. Dr. Thomas, I'll turn to you.
Thank you, Chair Nelson, Board of Directors. This is a week that we celebrate American education, and I have to say that it started, I think, back in the early 1920s or early 1900s, just recognizing the work of public educators. And I always say that it is the bedrock of this country. No matter what we do, we can trace our steps. All of us here, we've had some connection back to an educational program that made us successful today. And so today, I just want to say a huge thank you to our teachers, our paraprofessionals, and the thousands of other staffs that we have in our school system that really support the nearly 9,000 kids, 8,700 or so kids in our district. And the staff heard me say in our workshop week and welcoming everybody back that no matter what your title is, no matter what function you have in our district, we are all bound by a unified purpose, and that is to be that bridge to a young person to their success. And we all do it in a variety of capacities. So whether it's our principal that was leading a school today, or our food service folks, or the folks who are clearing off our sidewalks to get into school on this first slippery morning, everybody has a function that's tied to that universal purpose. So thank you to all of our educators here in Prior Lake Savage area schools and around the country.
Thank you. And before we read the proclamation, I'll just echo as board chair that one of the favorite things I've heard Dr. Thomas say since being here is he repeats again and again, every adult in our district is an educator. And I would imagine I could be speaking for all of us at the table as parents and board members that our experience in the district has proven that to be true time and time again. It doesn't matter if you're talking to the secretaries or the custodian or serving side by side with child nutrition services, if it's the superintendent of your schools or your teachers or your paraprofessionals. So everybody makes a difference, and I just, on behalf of the board, we value every single employee in this district and the difference you make every single day for every single student. So at this time, I'll ask Director Crosby to read our proclamation celebrating, and then just let you know that board members will be in the buildings this week to thank everybody.
So this is our proclamation recognizing American Education Week. Whereas public schools are the backbone of our democracy, providing young people with the tools they'll need to maintain our nation's precious values of freedom, civility, and equality. And whereas by equipping young Americans with both practical skills and broader intellectual abilities, schools give them hope for and access to a productive future. And whereas education employees, be they custodians or teachers, administrators or clerical staff, bus drivers or media specialists, child nutrition staff or support staff, work tirelessly to serve our children and communities with care and professionalism. And whereas our district, the community hub, bringing together adults and children, educators and volunteers, business leaders and elected officials in a common enterprise. Now, therefore, the Prior Lake Savage Area School Board of Education does hereby proclaim November 14th through 18th, 2022 as the 101st annual observance of American Education Week.
Thank you, and thank you again to everybody who serves our students. Next up is our proclamation for the National Educational Support Professionals Day. And Dr. Thomas, I'm turning back to you or passing it on to Emily. Okay.
We'll pass it to
Thank you, members of the board, Dr. Thomas. It is my honor to recognize these amazing educational support paraprofessionals. As you've already stated, it takes all of us to operate, and we thank our educational support professionals throughout our entire district for not only ensuring that we have a safe, effective, and efficient operations, but also being a part of the positive impact on our students' learning every day. So I want to thank them and echo the board's recognition and gratitude for all of their hard work in the district.
All right, and Stacy will be reading that proclamation this evening.
Okay. Excuse me, sorry. Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes November 14th through 18th, 2022 as National Educational Support Professional Staff Appreciation Week. This week we celebrate our thanks and gratitude for these essential staff. Whereas the National Education Association Representative Assembly established this day to honor the education support professionals who work day in and day out for public schools' well-being and effective functioning. Whereas these professionals also play a vital role in forming a healthy community as they help students inside and outside the classroom. There are 9 services under the Education Support Professionals umbrella, including clerical, custodial, and maintenance, food, health, and student, paraeducators, security, skilled trades, technical, and transportation services. Therefore, let it be resolved, the Board of Education hereby extends its appreciation to all Prior Lake Savage Area Schools educational support professionals for supporting the education of our students and declares November 14th through the 18th to be National Education Support Professional Staff Appreciation Week in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools.
Thank you. And next we are celebrating Substitute Educator Appreciation Day. Emily, back to you.
Thank you again. Again, it's an honor to recognize these outstanding individuals. Without their vital coverage during a staff absence, we would not be able to function throughout the day. Our over 430 substitute teachers in our district are essential for the continued learning and operations throughout all of our schools. These individuals display amazing flexibility, creativity, adaptability, and caring support as they help take care of not only our students but staff throughout the district, and we extend our deepest gratitude for them.
Thank you. And Director Drews will be reading that proclamation this evening.
Prior Lake Savage Area Schools recognizes November 14th to the 18th, 2022 as Substitute Educator Staff Appreciation Week. This week we celebrate our thanks and gratitude for these essential staff. Whereas Prior Lake Savage Area Schools has 257 licensed substitute educators and 171 non-licensed substitute educators, as well as 5 nurse substitutes. Whereas substitute educators must be flexible to teach a wide variety of subjects depending on the class they're teaching on any given day. Whereas substitute educators must adapt to different classrooms and different classes on multiple short-term periods. And whereas substitute educators are responsible for ensuring each day of instruction is productive and maintains continuity with a teacher's lesson plan. Therefore, let it be resolved, the Board of Education hereby extends its appreciation to all Prior Lake Savage Area Schools substitute educators for supporting the education of our students and declares November 14th to the 18th, 2022 to be Substitute Educator Appreciation Week in Prior Lake Savage Area Schools.
Thank you. Thank you again to all our employee groups recognized this evening. We will move on now to policy. We'll start with our first official read of policies. These were introduced at our last meeting. The first few I will take individually because they've got a little more discussion attached, with the exception of policy 509.1. Kindergarten early entrance. As you recall, we had gone through this before and then realized we were required to add a deadline to that policy, and that was added. Any further questions or comments on 509.1? All right. Next, we are going to go to policy 213. We had referenced this at our last meeting, and Dr. Thomas was going to go back to his learning leaders and then bring forward some recommendations to the executive committee, who would then bring it forward to the board. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Chair Nelson, Board of Directors. Yeah, several months ago, we were having conversation around our ability to work within the various committee structures that existed in the district and also finding ways to be more transparent and engaging with our community, really seeking input both from our external community as well as internal stakeholders as well. After reviewing the current practices of said committees over the first several months of the start of the school year, we believe there's opportunities to change some of those committee structures, which we have engaged our senior cabinet around the possibility of merging some committees together that have shared interests, they go hand in hand, if you will, as well as elevating some of our committees to a board-sanctioned level because it's of top priority, namely our Curriculum Advisory Committee that will now have more board governance weight to it in terms of authority and guidance. And with that, these are the recommendations that we would like to bring forward as reflected by some of the recommended policy changes that the board will be reviewing this evening. But all in all, I would say that I believe that this would allow the board to convene a variety of committees that would focus on policy, on budget, on curriculum, as well as legislative and executive functionings of the board, and allowing a more streamlined partnership with administration. So with that, Chair Nelson, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, and I know I'll be turning it to Director Crosby in a moment, but we also were looking for ways to increase community engagement and involvement at some of these deeper levels, and so that was in some of the thinking as well behind looking at revising this committee structure to try and open that up a bit more. I'm going to, while the three of us worked with Dr. Thomas on the exec team to work on this, Amy took the lead on this policy, so I'm going to turn it over to her if she wants to give an overview to you, and thank you for the extensive work you did researching other policies, and this was a lot to take a look at.
It was. We looked at a lot of kind of best practices across the metro and came to the point we're at tonight, which is obviously, you know, something for all of us to discuss. I think the key takeaways are streamlining meetings and not having repetitive work and repetitive information, and as well as increased involvement and engagement with the community to make sure that their voices are heard on our various committees. And so some of the work, a lot of the work that would come forward in committee would be driven by community voices. And then the stakeholders are the administration and decision makers being the board as well. So that led us to the exec committee, which is staying intact kind of as is, with some different parameters around what they would do exactly. And the other three committees would be finance advisory, teaching and learning, and policy. So we would have policies go through committee and then come to the board rather than the board as a whole. So we have more community engagement there, and to hopefully be more thorough. And with that, what questions do you have, or what observations do you see?
I would like to just add too that this would probably, this structure would dissolve our PELT committee, Public Engagement and Legislative. We're working to get more engagement across the board. And legislative then would probably fall to the exec committee, who would bring forward a draft platform for the full board for approval. So that would streamline that as well. If this is approved down the road, then we would be eliminating that committee. So hopefully you've all had a chance to look through it. Who would like to start the engaging discussion? Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, so I like it. I love the fact that we have a separate policy committee. I had two comments. I've already sent in some of my notes and comments, tried multiple times, of course, but the first thing is that we also have another policy out there that talks about board roles and different roles of the executive committee and all that, that probably is going to have to be also looked at for consistent language after we do this. So I don't want to lose that. I don't want to leave anything that's going to be inconsistent or anything like that out there. And that's also in the 200 series that we'll be going over. The other thing is that, as I mentioned, the fact that we have more community into the involvement into the finance committee, we're combining those. That's going to alleviate a lot of the administration overhead for the multiple committees, both internally and with the current Citizens Advisory Committee. So I like that. The thing that I do like to come back to is the fact of emphasizing throughout here that these committees are not making decisions. They're bringing those decisions.
They're advisory.
Yeah, they're advisory to the board. And that also, even though we have a separate policy, there's language in here that covers this. But to emphasize it, a lot of these policies reside within the individual groups. So there's an emphasis here of bringing a subject matter expert into the policy committee. But I would assume that that would actually be expedited even more because the policies themselves would actually be a focus of the individual committees, thereby making the entire process much more streamlined. So I like that. I would just emphasize it a little bit more that you'd want to send that down to the subject matter experts. The policy committee is not going to look at these things in a vacuum with, without
You mean
any
the
help.
administrators?
The administrators, but also the policies associated, let's say, with fund balance, et cetera, that the finance committee would also consider that, as it does already. It's just not expressly spelled out that is something that would actually reside there and then go from that finance committee to the policy committee, because those would be the subject matter experts with not only the business administration, but also the input.
Yep.
So it wasn't called out discreetly, but it's in there. I don't know if we need to be a little bit more robust with it. One of the things that we toyed with was putting policies and things like that out for public comment in general. I'm not sure if that was considered. And then my final comment, of course, was given our status and given the complexities of technology, I would like to see a technology committee resurrected, again, like we used to have.
Chair Nelson, may I?
Please.
Want to just build off the last point that Director France just mentioned, in that there's a distinction between the advisory committees and then administrative councils. I think it's called councils in here, and I think that's where. Yep. And so I think that's where that tech council would come into place, or whatever the term is going to be used. But there's a host of others that will be more subordinated to the managerial level versus to the board governance level. And that would certainly be one that wouldn't fall off.
Like our early childhood or community education. Or
it would be like the ad hoc.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep. Okay.
And I'm sorry, one last thing too. One of the things that isn't in, I think, the policy itself is also, and perhaps you were alluding to this, there would be charge statements that would be managed at that advisory council level. It's not written in the policy, but those charge statements, to get clarity and specifics about how they would, hand off their work, perhaps if it needs to go to the policy committee for approval, that would be then negotiated into that charge statement.
Okay. And Amy actually did quite a bit of work on drafting those as well to give us a sense of where that is at. And yeah, we were very careful that the wording would be advisory. Because we do want engagement, and but we have our managerial experts who are kind of either our curriculum or financial lead, and then our board chair, whoever chairs that committee, would co-manage with that, and then it would be a way to get that input as an advisory level, but it would not be up to them to decide to vote to bring something forward. Thanks for that clarity.
I do have one question, though, and maybe I missed this from our earlier ones, but I do like the fact that, for instance, in the finance committee, the board treasurer would chair it. I'm not sure we were that specific before as far as actually having the chair. The chair does not mean they're the subject matter expert, they're the facilitator, that's it.
And at the end of the proposed policy, it calls out exactly the chair's role.
Yep. Right.
And kind of their responsibilities, which it's much more of a facilitative and helping set an agenda. And
And it's much more consistent across the nation, because I looked at how things were done outside of Minnesota as well, and that's pretty much the way it was, but I don't want to confuse the chair with being a subject matter expert, because they're chairing it. We're still 100% dependent on the administrative leadership and managerial input into that.
We were careful to both honor that and not undermine that expertise, because we do need them to help assemble that agenda, bring forward the pressing issues, et cetera. So,
and I think
go ahead.
I was just going to comment one more thing about when you're talking about the effect on other policies of this policy. There are a few, 208 is hugely affected. 603 with teaching and learning is affected. So we're trying to be real thoughtful about, okay, when we move forward with this, how do we make sure that we're consistent in the trickle effect?
Stacy.
Just kind of from a holistic standpoint, can you talk a little bit about, so you have the subcommittees, and we have our board goals. So like we do the board goals in July, August timeframe. Does the work tie back to the goals? Meaning, I think in the past, there's been times where, and this is previous now, but, a committee would start to go down a certain way, and they're off on a tangent. And it's like, that wasn't the charge that the board gave you. And so, like, as chair, a couple times I had to step in and be like, guys, you're going down the road that the 7 didn't agree to. So, like, where is that, like, checks and balance?
May I speak to that? So that actually is going back to the distinction of the chair as a representative of the board to convene and to govern that meeting / facilitate that meeting. Administration and that chair board representative would work closely at setting that agenda so that they were very tight in terms of, here's the pathway that we need to go, this is what was aligned from our previous board meeting, or this is how it ties back to our district declared priorities and goals, so that we can prevent, those bird walks, that happen. Now, will that happen from time to time as you start kind of spinning off and getting into conversation? You might find something of merit, and that's actually, I think, where you all are talking about, maybe we would bring on an ad hoc kind of task force to look deeper into a more granular aspect of whatever said topic of advisory committee would be. But we would manage it that way. But I think the calibration between administration and board rep would really set that agenda to stay aligned right from the get-go.
And in terms of timing, because I think that's also what you're getting at a little bit, I think it's in here, the annual statement of scope would be approved with the school year, and so would community membership. And obviously the board members would be more calendar year.
Right. They float in and out in January,
so
but
they float in and out,
the work starts in the August,
yeah.
September timeframe, because it has to be on. And so as far as committees, just as far as community involvement or people, I know last time, like with finance advisory, it seemed to work pretty well, but it was an application type process. Is that?
Yeah, that's what we envisioned.
Yeah, that's to be determined,
Okay.
in terms of the administration with the board, in terms of what that regulation would look like, and the chair, the chair of that committee.
But those rosters come forward for approval?
Yep, that would come in the fall. Every fall, we would come back with a new scope of work, charge statement, as well as a roster of individuals who will be serving on that committee. And we present that, to the board in August or early September for each calendar year. And then obviously the work of the committees could ebb and flow based upon the flow of movement. So for example, we are ready to enter budget proper season come January, which is why at the last meeting I was saying we really want to make sure we have a committee structure that we can fall into so that we can really start that budgeting process. So we know that there will be some of those peaks and valleys of workloads.
One thing on that, just when we were doing, from the FLIR standpoint, when we were talking about committees and assignments, just for the breadth of the work, is we asked for like a 2-year commitment, just from the standpoint of learning, and that
continuity.
Maybe, yeah, so I don't know if that's something, I don't know if it's something we necessarily have to spell out, but just to get someone's feet wet, and then to have that rotating, so you're not always kind of having, there's people that have experience
Yep.
and people that
And we can
don't.
stagger those as well, so you have some continuity.
Yeah, so I don't know if there's language around that, but, I think that'd just be helpful from the public standpoint of how they work and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I know one of the discussions we had is how much do you put in this actual policy
Right.
versus how much do you put into the individual committee charge and, outline for the year? And so we went back and forth from
Well,
adding
I mean,
a lot
that-
in and pulling a lot
That
out.
could, you could put that if there's a application process too.
Right
That
at
can
the
be
top of the
procedural
application.
or something like that,
Right.
but to have that be the spirit of it, I think,
Yep.
is important too.
Absolutely.
I do,
I'm sorry, Mary, Jonathan had his hand up, I'll start with him.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I do like the changes and and streamlining and simplifying, as others have said. One observation that I think in practice could be helpful too is if we're intentional with the external committee assignments and trying to have them sort of tie with what's happening with our internal ones. And some consistency there. I'm thinking just from my own experience specifically with Scale, in the past 2 years, Scale has this year really, they've been wanting to have a school board member join the exec board at Scale and wanting to align legislative priorities and wanting to align, lobbying efforts, because the more the messages are the same, the more effective we can be. So I think just seeing where people are involved with these different pieces and trying to have the external assignments then be consistent with what committee assignments people have here would be helpful.
I'd like to add on to that. First of all, there is a lot of overlap with that example that he used, and I think that that Director Drews just used with the legislative, because all of these external agencies do that. But more importantly, I would like to formalize when we do go to our external agency association groups and all that, that we do write up notes and actually send that out appropriately to the rest of the board instead of relying on the administrative reports or our own board reports at the end, because some of the things that happen in these individual agencies and associations, I think would be of interest, and memorializing that and what happens in our notes, et cetera, would be beneficial to the whole board as well as to the public. And I know we've been a little loose on that, and it does require a little bit more work, but I think that the work actually will help us, help each other, and actually make it a little bit more concrete.
Was that a past practice, Stacy? To submit written notes?
No, I wouldn't say written.
Yeah.
I mean, I think depending on, everyone had reports for the most part, but I don't recall anything ever written, but I don't see any, I mean, the way that like AMSD and C, they have their own newsletters already. It's something easy to forward to people.
Yeah,
I think.
that's what I'm thinking too. Would
I
that
don't
be
know
enough?
about Southwest Metro. They probably have something.
Well, they have their board meeting notes just like we do, but what we normally refer to when we do our own, end of meeting reports is basically what affects our school district, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on that isn't as impactful, and we try to give other messages and talk about involvement and talk about things that only affect us, really.
So is this something you're talking about putting into policy, or just an agreement as the board moves forward with new committee assignments that you might less formally agree to do for each other?
I think it's more role. If you're going to be a representative on there, then you have some obligation to bring information back. And if there's nothing different and you just make sure everyone has the newsletter or whatever's then that's fine. But, I mean, there's some external committees here that we never hear from, that sort of thing. And I think there's stuff in there that would benefit everyone. And again, I'm not trying to add more work on everyone's plate, but I do think it makes us a little bit more of a conscious participant when we go to these other committee meetings.
Sure. So we're not formalizing anything, but that's something as we look at the committee structure come January, you could decide to do as part of your assignments and report outs. Does that make sense? Am I hearing everybody correctly? Do I have direction
I
that
like
that's
I
the way
like
to go?
the idea. I think it's
Okay.
a fine thing. I don't know that it needs to necessarily be in the policy,
Right.
but I think as practice, I think it's reasonable.
Sure.
I think it would be helpful.
Any other comments or questions on that? I just want to make sure I'm not missing any direction.
Yeah, for the most part, I agree with that. Southwest Metro is kind of its own separate animal because it's a board exactly like this with its own separate subcommittees and an own committee assignments. So you can easily go down several different avenues depending on what that scale and scope is. But I agree, bringing information back that directly impacts this community, financially, students, education, bringing back some of that parity where they too are struggling just like others across the state or across the nation. That's definitely helpful information to bring back.
Okay, thank you. More comments or questions on this policy that we're talking about right now, 213?
Okay. Oh, no. Oh, no, okay. I didn't see you, I didn't turn. So I want to ask another question to the rest of the board, and that's it's a comment that Stacy made and was followed up by Dr. Thomas. You know, it's especially when we bring in the community, things are going to, you know, go off track a little bit from the agenda, but we want that feedback. And a lot of that feedback, as Dr. Thomas mentions, may have merit, and we don't want to lose that. Is there anything we want to put in here to say we're going to have kind of a parking lot of those so we don't lose them and we do consider them as far as community feedback, even if it may not be appropriate for the agenda of that particular committee?
Can you give us examples? I mean, what do you like?
If someone brings something up that's not in the charge of the committee, will someone still document what was brought up? But it might not necessarily come to the board table.
So well, it might be a scenario where you're leaning, you know, if something was out of scope, the feedback at the committee level would be, well, here's the subject matter expert in our district to talk to about that.
Yep.
Right.
And if it rose to that, then the board member in the managerial position, the administrator could then always elevate that to bring it forward.
Yeah, just curious what
I'm
Dr.
really
Thomas
referring to something that that was said by Stacy here when you said that, you know, the facilitator, we want to keep the discussion on track during the committee, and sometimes they go down.
It's not necessarily, it's not the conversation. It's more like the direction, like they're off doing something that was totally not in the purview of what the 7 board members agreed to when they set scope. So if they start going down a path where they're like going down and talking to people and hiring someone or like doing things like that's outside the scope of what was talked about. That's an extreme example, but it's not a real example, but you know, where the conversation, it's not even conversation, it's more action. It's not conversation, it's action. So I'm saying, in my opinion, I think, you know, you have the scope of what's being talked about. Yeah, you're going to go off tangents and things like that, which is totally fine. But I also think that there has to be continuous, you know, conversation of, you know, what the charge is and what the direction of that you've been given from the board.
And I will also say that it's clear in the introduction of the policy that there is still room for board-appointed ad hoc committees for things that are outside of the scope of those committees. So, Dr. Thomas, would you like to address this?
I'll just add from my experience sitting on hundreds of committees over my career, there will be conversation that comes up, and I think that's more of an internal committee protocol. Something comes up and a topic that we're on, and it could be some ideas that are generated. And some of the ideas, you know, let's say we're going to, you know, we can't do everything. So we're going to, out of these 5, these are the 2 that we're going to come forward with. But from an administrative standpoint, these other 3 have merit. And that's what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
So part of my experience has been to, you know, work with that individual on the committee who might have come forward with these ideas to say, yeah, let's hold these on the back burner for right now. We may revisit those, or we may, you know, proof concept these two that we brought forward and find that one of the two kind of fell flat. So we're going to go back now to here are the three that we had in our parking lot. So that's more of a managerial practice of the committee, not so much that's dictated by policy. That's just being professional. I think good practice. So I would say that would have. I have not been a part of a committee where I have not had conversation with a variety of committee members where ideas are just completely stifled, because we will revisit them in some form or fashion. That's just been my experience.
Yeah, and that wasn't what that's not what I inferred when I was saying. But, I think my experience has been with board members, like board members when we were in more smaller subcommittees, not even with the public. The board, you know, board members all of a sudden were off doing something that was like, okay, we didn't really talk about that. That's not really what we were saying. Yeah. So, and there's more action when a board member's, you know, doing it than there is when you're advisory type thing. So that was my.
So anything outside of scope is still subject to the will of the board as a whole.
Right. I could also envision some scenarios where something is brought up in that specific committee that is outside of the scope, but maybe it's in scope for a different committee. So that's where the facilitator could bring it to the chair of that committee to say, this came up in our discussions, here's some additional information, and people to follow up with. Go.
And I'm envisioning that if we do move forward approving this policy, once we've gone through the next few reads, that there will probably be some growing pains. It'll be a living document, and as we go forward, we'll find things that, you know, you'll want to adjust or amend as you go forward. But I think coming forward pretty boldly, thanks to Dr. Thomas working with his staff and Amy digging into the other resources, to come forward and really just draw a line and say, we want community engagement, we want to streamline, let's do it across the board, let's redo the whole structure system and make it more effective. I think, you know, a year down the line, you may revise what that policy looks like or make addendums to it, but for now, I think it's a refreshing step forward.
It's a bold change.
It's a bold change.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Amy, all you guys for your hard work on it. I think it also lends itself to what I've seen is there'll be two board members on these committees, right? Yep. So many times I will sit in a meeting and I will take away something completely different than you might have, right? Yep. There's two of us there to listen and share. And so I think that's just an important piece to know is that yes, there's a facilitator, but then there's another board member to listen and learn. And then to carry that forward, I would say that watching the amount of interest we had in the Finance Advisory Committee was outstanding in our community, and I think it shows that our community wants to be involved. Yes. And our community has a lot of knowledge and interest, and so I think it's important to plug that in at all levels in a little more structured setting. Yep. Because I think that we've all been on committees, and then nobody shows up. We really want people to be here. Yes. And be formalized.
Well, it's in policy shows where the priorities of the board are. Let's get community engagements. So other comments or questions at this point? It'll come forward again at study session before it comes forward for a vote. Enrique.
Certainly, thank you. So just circling back to the Finance Advisory Council in 1.11.5. So based off of what I'm hearing, what I'm reading, that will be dissolved and it'll be kind of elevated, if you will, or to the Finance Advisory Committee, formerly known as Finance Facilities Line Range. Yeah. So the
FLIRP is not going to exist anymore. Yeah. Okay. I was like, I thought he was saying
formerly known as. Yeah. So the community members that were selected at the start of this year for the Finance Advisory Council, will they be able to continue at least in the early going in this new?
Yeah, I would. Okay. Yeah.
That's what I would envision.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. We were at the meeting we asked them for feedback on that. Yeah, we had so it's just that we were thinking about this, and so we got their feedback. But yeah, I would think, I mean, they were, I think, encouraged to read it. Yeah, and they liked it.
Okay, great. Yeah, just thinking through the community engagement piece, it would be a shame to go through all this effort to stand up this council, and then after a year dissolve it and ask people to reapply.
Nope. Well, the one thing that I know might be more of, and I was just thinking about this, is I don't know if we necessarily want to formalize it in the policy, but maybe and procedurally. I do think if you're volunteering to come on this and you're taking a spot, because there are, like, for the finance group, there were numerous people, and so we couldn't let everyone on. So attendance, I think, because more often than not, people have good intentions and then they don't show up, like, for 3 times or 4 times. You know what I mean? I think, I don't know if it has to be formalized, but I do think if someone's taken a spot and they're not showing up after so many periods of times, it's time for somebody else to do it. So that's just my opinion. I just don't think they should take a spot if someone's not showing up.
I think when you guys structured that, though, before they even applied, they knew
when it was the meeting,
when it was going to be, or the time of day. So
right.
at least you could figure it out.
That is true. That is a good idea.
Before you said yes to something that you knew you couldn't do.
That is.
And we get it, life will happen, you know?
Yep.
But
right.
Excessive kind of things.
But I mean, if you've been on it for a couple of years and you've shown up 25% of the time, you know what I mean? Right. It's just, we don't want that.
And maybe that could be in expectations that go out with the application, you know, here's the functions of the role if you choose to pursue it.
If you have formalized with the chair, the board person could be an attendance taker and be like, hey, you're on the list.
All right. Any other discussion on this for now? All right, so for the most part, it sounds like we are moving forward as revised, and it will come forward next at the study session. Thank you to everybody who put so much work into this, and then depending on how this all comes together, we'll direct then me reaching out to current and future board members to gather input in terms of what people's interest level are in different committees, so you'll be prepared in January for that going forward. So thank you for that, and we will move on then, if there's no other questions, to policy 203, the board operating norms. And as you recall, in this one, the only change that was suggested was 613, which was removing the restriction at business meetings for open forum that you have to speak to a topic not on the agenda. We would leave study sessions as is, but we would remove the restriction for business meetings. Any other comments or questions on that policy? All right. Policy 208. Amy, is there anything in particular you want to address on this one?
Right, this was impacted by 213. I tried to be consistent with language in there. My computer just froze, sorry.
Oh, here's the policy.
So, thank you.
Yep.
So it's about the language changing to the policy committee, you know, versus going through the board. And then, of course, the board still would approve them when they come to the board, but first they go through the policy committee.
But, and just to clarify, now, because I know the way we had structured it originally was requirement of all those readings. Martha, I'm going to poke on you. So now will we go back to like 8 years ago when we did it?
First, second.
Okay, so it's less readings than what we have currently. 2 less, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So it'll go more in the cadence of, which is, that's what's, I think, required is those 2.
Because they will have gone through the thorough policy committee review.
Right. So it's 1, 2, and then approval.
So just to clarify, so we go, let's say the policy committee reviews a policy, and then the first reading of that policy is when they discuss it with the rest of the board at a study session, or is the next one considered the first reading of the policy? When
I would think that the first reading where it comes forward after they've already minutia, when it comes out of committee, then at that point you can say, we're not ready to bring, you know, if the board could say, we're not ready, you got to send it back, we have too many questions, then you could have it come back for another first read if you wanted to.
As a non-action item.
Right.
As a first read. And if you all like how it reads, then it would be a thumbs to move it to your action agenda item, and or to Director Ruel's point, if there's significant or substantive changes that are still needed, it would get sent back to the policy committee for the recommendations that the board has had.
Right.
to revise.
And I think too, the other thing is you want awareness of the community as a whole, not just the community people. So, because the community is just gonna see it sometimes when it's first on the agenda, just after it's already come through the policy. So it gives them a little more time to make comments. And now that we've changed the way commenting is, now they can comment really any meeting. So it just gives them, you should at least give them 2 shots at it before you vote, so.
Good clarification and.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's kind of why we had the extra readings, was because of public comment and to be able to have public comment and talk about it. And now that it's streamlined and there's policy work, you can kind of go back to traditional policies and how they approved.
Amy, was there more you wanted to present on that?
No, I'm looking at this language and I'm not sure it's exactly what we're getting at. So I'll double check that outside of here. So the language might look a little differently next time.
I think that's the intent. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
and from.
I just want to call that out.
I think, and Dr. Thomas, you can reiterate, like from the standpoint of it coming forward the first time is when you'd want to have as much direction of what's going to happen, whether it be the subject matter expert or the whoever has to coming a second night later. You want that to happen at that meeting.
Absolutely.
And before, and then really the second reading should be,
Approval.
well, no, Martha, right, the second.
Second is approval.
Yeah.
Second is the final. So do you introduce, so it's 2 meetings?
Yeah, because it's
Okay.
gone through policy
If
review
it hasn't
committee.
been sent back, it's 2 meetings.
Yep, okay,
Study session and then board.
okay. Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure that's enough, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you want it.
What if it's on study session?
Right, because it might be that if you come back from the meeting, this would be something I would think about, is if it comes to the board and the board's like, no, this is not, we want to do a lot of changing, you might want to reintroduce. Well, yeah, or send it back, and then it reintroduces for first. Right, because you want to make sure that the public is seeing.
Right.
Like,
I think any
as much of-
modification
Yes.
would come back at the next meeting as a first again.
It would come
Anytime
back.
it's modified, the next meeting, that's a first.
yeah, so that they have the whole cycle, the public, to be able to approve it as is.
And it probably makes sense in that annual charge statement to lay out the timeline of policies that we're reviewing, and when. So if the public wants to have input on policy,
Well, and
whatever.
They know when.
yeah, and I think Dr. Thomas can kind of speak to this, but I mean, the cadence, when we were doing it traditionally, the old, like how we're kind of going back, some of our policies didn't get reviewed for like 15 years.
Which is why some of the language in here, I think I need to change in 208 to make sure that we are staying on that 3-year cycle.
You have in here, the school board will review policies at least once every 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, but all I'm saying is, I think you would make an I mean, I think it would be up to the board if that cadence, that type of like, pace works with the new, it might be too much. That's all I'm saying. It might not be, but I think.
Well, yeah, and again, there are some, policy that's outdated 15 years.
Right.
Sorry. A policy that's outdated 15 years, there'd be deep changes likely, right?
Right.
But when you're on an every 3-year cadence, there's not significant or substantive changes.
Right.
So there might be some outliers that got to catch up to that pace. And then obviously any new policy would be subject to that kind of depth of conversation. So yeah, I think when you have your regular established calendar, they're small pieces.
And a lot of stuff comes forward without any change, yeah. I think it's just been, I think, really good, in my opinion, especially even as a new board member, as a member of the community, to be able to see the policies come through and review, because that's when you really find out how things work. You're able to ask questions. It's really a good way to learn the district. And it also, like, state law changes. And so there are changes that come through that it's important to see that too. So I think keeping that regular schedule is really important. So.
Yeah, and I think that'd be in the annual statement of scope. Yeah.
Well, we said it in the board goals too. We have those policies like the 2, 3, and 400s for this year, so.
All right, so are we good with 208 with the, and you'll just take a look with a fine-tooth comb to make sure it's what you want. Let us know if there's any updates on that. Okay, any other comments or questions there? All right, the next one was 201.1 school board vacancies, and again, there were no changes there, and we do have the additional document provided by MSBA that does outline all the specific examples and timelines if needed. Policy 204, school board member violation of policy. We had no change there. That had a lot of work done previously. Any comments or questions? All right. Policy 205, open and closed meetings, had no changes. Any additional comments or questions? 215, school board use of electronic communications. Any comments or questions? All right. Moving on to our second read of policies. These would be the ones that would come forward at, in December, then would we approve them, Martha? Or unless we opened up a study session.
Correct.
Yeah, so we would
12th.
just December. Again, we went through these several times now. Is there any policy on here that you want me to specifically call out that you have questions or comments about?
No, there wasn't a lot of changes on
There was not a lot of changes.
Yeah.
We did the easiest ones first.
Yeah.
Yeah, have we gotten any resolution on?
Yeah, Dr. Thomas, do you want to address that?
Yes, we did. So the policy 202.1, student representative on school board. Chair Nelson and I met with the Student Council Executive Board and their advisor a month or so ago. And the conversation generally was they want to have more interaction with the board. And I think the understanding, and I'm paraphrasing, so please jump in on this too, the ask was how do we get more student representation? And so part of their conversation about exploring the possibility of rotating the student spot was so that various different student perspectives could be shared at the board meetings. One of the things that the student exec board didn't understand is that they don't actually weigh in on conversations and bring agendas to this meeting. This is your meeting. So at the end of our conversation, we had discussed the possibility of what would it look like for the board or representatives of the board to attend their meetings. And they have a variety of kind of student groups. Mm-hmm. That way their student voice could be heard at a board level in their context and us going to them versus them coming to the board. And that was the conversation that we had. If they are going to take action to rotate membership, one of the things that we did have a conversation with, and I did have a conversation with MSBA, is that there is, they are eligible for a scholarship. And so right now in its current fashion, that scholarship is given to a singular student. And so that's something that, again, that the exec board wasn't necessarily aware of. So I think we would have to address that. But if they do decide to make any changes to the representation of the board, it wouldn't take effect until next year. We're going to keep with our current singular board member rep for this school year. And then should any changes happen between now and the end of the school year that would affect for the next year's rep, those changes would take place then. Did I leave anything out?
No. And in part it honors Ariana's commitment and the job description that goes under president of student council, and doesn't change anything this way. And we gave her the bad news. She's stuck with us for the rest of the year. So, but we will make sure that there's an effort made to follow up on elevating student voice in different ways. That seemed to be where the real interest was, engagement and elevating student voice. And I know as a whole, we've been moving more that direction, and this will just be one more avenue to kind of solidify that. So, any other questions on the policies as listed? Okay, then we'll move on to board policy approval. Policy 535, service animals in schools. It has been reviewed and presented for 2 readings prior to this approval, and I'll be asking for board action this evening. I'll start with a motion in a second. Do I have a motion to approve policy 535 regarding service animals in schools?
So made.
by
Enrique,
and then Mary. Okay. Comments or questions? Right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And that carries 7-0 this evening. Thank you. All right, Dr. Thomas, I'll turn it back to you for administrative reports. Superintendent report, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll start there. All right. Got a few things this evening that I just want to update. So last week was a very important week in our country. It's where we as citizens exercise our right to vote. And we had a variety of races all throughout the country. And locally here, we had our school board elections. And so this Friday, I believe, we will officially canvass the election outcomes. But I do want to just share, and it's been in a variety of print media, but want to share that we have Enrique Velasquez, along with newcomers Lisa Atkinson, Amy Bullion, and Jessica Olstad, who will be joining the board in January officially, and want to just congratulate all of them and welcome them to the PLSAS governance family, and looking forward to perspectives that they will all bring. So please take a moment to congratulate them. I know it was a very stressful, strenuous campaign season, and you do so because you have a deep passion for kids. So I can't thank this board and those new coming to the board all what you will do, because it takes a lot, and it means a lot to our students. So congratulations to all of them. I also completed our listening and learning tours, and over the course of 5 or 6 weeks, we did 5 convenings throughout our community, and we hit all aspects of our community. We had a late confirmation for Spring Lake Township. We weren't able to complete that because we were already completed with the rotation. So, you know, I've been down there already, but we'll definitely make it a point to get out to Spring Lake in another formal fashion. But we had members from all over the community coming to various spots, and some attended multiple times. So I will say that there are some great opportunities for me as a new member and resident of the community, but also my role as a superintendent, to get to know our community more, and to listen to their ideas about, you know, what's really important to them, what's working well for our district, and where there's some opportunities for us to improve. And what I really appreciate is that our community is very candid. I mean, these are very open, unscripted conversations. I took about 15 minutes or so to kind of say, this is who I am, and this is a little bit about my path of how I've gotten to this place. But after that, I just open up for dialogue, and it was a great opportunity to engage our community and build community for the first time. And I say that because it literally happened at a couple of our events where folks in that same community that didn't really realize that they were, you know, right down the street from each other having some conversation for the first time. So that was great. But there were just about 5 themes that came out that I want to share with the board and with our community. And not surprising to me. I mean, a lot of this we've discussed or, you know, I've done some research on, so there's some validation, but also I think just hearing it from our community and how they experience our district, even though it might have been something that I've heard about, to hear it again from our community is really important. And I'll expound on each of these a little bit. So the first one was around our finances for the district. This was a large topic that was at every single one. The ones I'm sharing actually were at kind of big parent themes of each of our sessions. Financial transparency, it should be no surprise to anyone, you know, on this board or in our community. That was something that came out in every one of these listening and learning sessions for me. And, you know, this is why, you know, very early on in my arrival, and obviously with Executive Director Fredrickson and her team, we really wanted to address the fiscal transparency and stewardship, and really began to change the entire budgeting process, calendaring, et cetera, that you all have reviewed. And if you recall, also very intentional to add community engagement points in that calendar as well to ensure that we are getting out to the community, presenting iterations of budget development, getting ideas, and allowing that to kind of help drive some of the conversations that we have and what we would ultimately recommend to the board for approval for a budget. And that's something that, I'm very thankful and appreciative of, and obviously more to come once we really get into the budgeting season. I would also say that also affirmed our ability to merge a couple of these committees or councils, whatever we might have called them in the past, to really bring a strong emphasis of governance priority to that work. And again, these are taxpayer dollars, and we have to be good stewards of those resources. And it's not like we have tons of resources, so we've got to really be prudent about how we approach those resources and really get the best return to our community. And as you all heard a couple weeks ago from our auditor and the audit that you just approved tonight, we're in very good standing. We've got some resources that we can address some immediate things that we need to attend to, but also being cautious that there are federal dollars that are coming to a close. And so we also know that we're going to have to be managing the backside of that conversation and ensure that we're delivering a structurally balanced budget and not relying on soft monies for things that should just be declared in our general fund. And we know that everything can't be in the general fund. So that's going to force our conversation with our community to say what truly is a priority, because everything can't be one. So that was a big theme that came out. The other big theme was academic programming as kind of a big umbrella. Obviously, again, that being our strategic direction number one, that's not a surprise that that came out. But I will say that there are some specifics that I would call out that I think are in the hopper right now in terms of some of the work that we're engaging in. I can't say it enough. Priority number one for me as a superintendent is to really solidify and strengthen our core academic framework. We know that for the past several years, for a variety of reasons, we have seen significant academic challenges that our students faced, not just here, but literally all over the country with our NCAT scores that also, our NCAT score that just recently came out. We can see we've got significant work to do in education. And that goes without saying to strengthen that core academic framework. That is our bread and butter. So that's something that came out loud and clear. Tied to that, or kind of spinning from that, is conversations around gifted and talented. That was a very strong theme that I heard from our community. And not only about our present state, but also got a lot of good history from our community. Members of our community who have had kids for several years in our schools who have seen a change from perhaps their oldest child's experience in our GT pathways compared to their current student who's in a younger student who's going through, and the changes that they've seen over time. And so we are currently engaging our community in that programmatic review. Similar to policies, we have to also look at our programs and offerings that we have in our schools on a regular cadence as well, so that we don't just get stagnant. I'm learning about a very rich history that we had with regards to meeting the needs of GT learners in our district. And I know that due to some of the budget reductions, et cetera, over the years, some of that support has been reduced. And I think that's kind of like the dialectic that is presenting itself to this community. The strong desire to have itinerant GT staff, for example, that aren't necessarily in a GT program, but are actually there to help supplement and bring the high tide to all instruction in our schools. Strong demand for that. That comes with a dollar figure, right? So, our ability to get resources to bring certain positions back means a couple of things. Means what will come off the plate, and or what will this community support in terms of a referendum, for example. You know, and again, in the audit report, we were about $2,000 less per student. Now, in theory, that's great. I mean, we're giving a great return in terms of the dollars that we are spending, but looking at some of our neighboring districts who are spending $2,000 plus more, with netting about $17 million more into their general fund budget, they can do some significant things. So again, that's a balanced conversation that our community and we as administration and board will have to have. But very clearly, I believe our review of that GT program and any recommended changes that come from that is going to be of top priority. I would say in line with programmatic components, our career-ready students was another theme under that academic umbrella. Lots of conversations about balancing traditional college pathways for students juxtaposed to industry needing workers yesterday and students getting certificates and going straight into the workforce, perhaps, you know, launching their career, or they're going to the workforce and balancing career with college as well. So that's something that is of strong interest that came out, you know, in our engagement. And again, feedback that I heard as well is that, for example, our MinCaps program, great opportunity for our students. And what we're seeing right now is that there are funding gaps. So we've had a vision for, I think, very innovative and attractive programs. And now we need to ensure that if that is a priority for our district, that we are fully resourcing that whole scope and sequence of that program, or our dual immersion program as well. We launched it at the elementary level. We know that those students will grow up, become seniors one day. So how do we bridge that secondary component with that dual immersion component or pathway? So those are some of those programmatic themes that came out, and that also, by the way, is under review, our dual immersion. Sorry, I didn't mention that. But again, learning from that review process that will come forward with recommendations to the board as well. And then lastly, this theme of I don't know how I should say it, balancing technology with good old-fashioned human interactive teaching. How's that? And I jokingly said during these engagements with our community that the original technology to me is the human relationship. And I know we have lost that over these past couple of years, not only with our staff and our students, but just people in general. By being humans, we are social beings, and so to not be in communion with one another really has changed, I think, the fabric of society, and I think we see that in a variety of different ways, namely here in our school with getting our students back to our school campuses on a regular basis and interacting and almost kind of relearning how to do school and how to engage at school were some of our challenges last year, I know. But then going into this year, I think it's also balancing the efficiencies that we gained during COVID with technology with that of the one-to-one relationship that's so important for our students and our staff. And again, the Search Institute at the U has proven decade after decade, you know, one of the developmental assets that always rises to the top is to have a caring adult in your life as a young person, outside of your parents or your family unit, but like having an additional caring adult for you. And again, John Hattie showed the effect of a teacher is significant, or an educator. So we need to find ways to embrace technology. It's not going to go away. When we buy curriculum, there are digital licenses, more so than they are hardcover books. So it is going to be something that we'll want to balance and manage effectively. Yes, there was a time where we had such significant shortage due to illness, et cetera, where a lot of our classroom instruction was flipped or asynchronous. Understand that. There was a reason for that. But that cannot and will not replace the relationships that we know mean so much to our staff and our students. So that was another theme that came out. The last two kind of overarching themes with a couple of sub-conversations in it, the second to the last was our school climate and culture. We experienced, I think, a lot of things over the past several years in our school communities, whether it was from the pandemic or from some of the social unrest, the racial unrest, all throughout that impacted our community and our district, is something that came out in every single one of my sessions, every single one. And I just need to be very clear, and I've said this with in these sessions. We can't unsee, unhear, unexperience what happened over these past several years. It's part of our district narrative, but we cannot be held hostage by that history. And it's very important for this community to understand and acknowledge that's part of our story. But the importance of history is to learn from that and to not repeat it if it was negative. And that's something that, you know, I'm very much embracing as your superintendent, is to have a vision of looking forward, acknowledging and honoring, you know, our past. It's a part of who we are. But the healing that's needed in this community for a variety of different reasons is going to be ongoing. There's not going to be a one and done fix. There's going to be conversations that we'll engage in over the years to kind of repair, I think, some of the challenges and the scars and the wounds that have happened. And there's not going to be a one size fits all. You know, for example, I had to bring closure to a situation, you know, that occurred pertaining to, you know, our basketball, our girls basketball team. That was just one attempt to bring restoration to a community of our students and our families. Did it resonate and solve all the issues that might have occurred? Probably not. But we do need to acknowledge the significant challenges that happened and bring some closure to those narratives. Otherwise, those narratives will hold us hostage. So that is something that I heard very strongly. We also know that, and I've said this every single one of these sessions too, conversations about social emotional learning came up. And I want to be very clear, it's not an either or when it comes to social emotional learning and academic, core academic framework. It's a both and. I always say our kids come to us with their heads and their hearts. They come to us whole beings. And so we know that if a student is struggling emotionally, whether it's something at home in the community, a friendship, whatever it might be, relationship breakup, they bring that to school. Just as much as we as adults bring our whole being to that school environment. You know, I'm Michael all the time, and life with Michael happens, and something happens to me in my home environment or the community that might impact how I show up. And again, I would hope that my colleagues could notice those things about me and pull me aside and say, hey, Michael, how you doing this morning? You okay? Just as much as we do morning meetings at the elementary school, for example, and that's our ritual, our routine to make sure that everyone's seen and heard and voices in the room. And, you know, it's a time for a student to kind of bring something forward and process. It's a time to celebrate. I've been at morning meetings where we're doing birthday parties as well. So SEL was something that came up in every single one of our sessions. And it's a both and. So how do we ensure that students are ready to learn? Because they're wanting to learn. I guarantee you that. They want to learn, but they also want to leverage that trusting adult in our school systems to maybe process some things to say, you know what, I need to kind of clear this before I'm ready to plug and play. So that's something that came up very strong. Lastly, the overarching theme that came up, excuse me, is school safety and security. I mean, just today, again, in our world, we are experiencing another tragedy. And it just seems like every time I turn on the news, something is happening on a campus somewhere, a school campus somewhere. And I have to tell you, as a superintendent, that's the thing that will keep me up all night long, is the worrying about the safety of our students. And as a parent, and it never stops, I understand, I can empathize with that deeply. So whether they're K-12 or college or adults, children, as parents, when we put our kids into the world, we want them to be safe. And that's something I don't take lightly as your superintendent, which is why we had this conversation in terms of staff adjustment this evening as well. It's been one of the areas I questioned, with all due respect to our team here, about our ability to effectively lead through a crisis that should happen. God forbid that should happen. We need to have a structural support for that. So, and that's actually one of our strategic directions, you know, providing safe and secure and supportive learning environments in all of our campuses. So that's something that kind of hit all of those conversations. There was a lot of conversation around drug use in our community, and access and exposure to drugs, and what's happening with youth. And we actually heard this a few weeks back from our SRO about some of the conversations that we're having, particularly at the high school level, where we know maybe access and experimentation tends to be seen and experienced by bringing in, you know, canine sweeps, et cetera. We also know that new laws in Minnesota are potentially going to make some things more accessible to our kids in ways that are fairly concerning. And so all of our respective city councils have put in moratoriums on, you know, various aspects of that law to study this a bit more to help protect, I think, what ultimately will be our youth in our community, as well as adults, but specifically speaking in our role here in our school district. So that was a conversation that came up, and the fact that some of what our kids are experiencing and exposed to literally looks like M&Ms and Skittles, and you can't tell the difference between them. And so might be an offer of a Skittle, and it could be something completely different. So I think those were conversations and concerns that came up in various ways at every single one of them, the engagement sessions. And the last two, kind of going back to, I think, technology in schools, was cell phone use and kind of how cell phones are being managed in our schools. And again, I would say that technology is something that we're going to have to look at holistically. We are living among generations of young people where they're born with two hands and a cell phone. It's just a part of their way of life. And technology is their life, where this was introduced in many of our lives in various ways. So it is going to be a conversation, I think, that schools, leaders will ultimately have to have with their communities as well, in terms of how technology is incorporated and how it's being used in our schools. But that was something that came up. And then the last one that did come up was around, kind of tied back to school safety, and that was our SROs, and I kind of spoke to that earlier. So those are the dominant themes that came out in my listening and learning sessions. And again, it was a great opportunity for me to hear from our community, great information, and a lot of that information has been shared with our senior leadership team, and again, shared with our learning leaders, which include many of our principals. And so we'll be working with these themes as the board looks to priority development, because our community has spoken, so to speak. No pun intended. So that is the update on the listening and learning tour. So just a couple of other quick things, and then I'll be done. Oh, you know what? I will say this too. there were a lot of positive things that came out of these conversations. I just looked at some other additional notes that I had. So one, students and parents love their teachers, love the school staff. I mean, the timing of American Education Week is perfect because it doesn't matter what role you have in our district, a variety of roles in each of these sessions were thanked. So could be a custodian, could be a teacher, could be a para, could be a nurse practitioner. I mean, you name it. They love the staff in our schools. The community also talked about deep appreciation for the variety of academics and activities that are options for our students to engage in. So that was something that came out in every single one of the conversations. Kind of going back to a different theme where, we talked about the, I just want to make sure I name it the right one, school climate and culture theme. One of the other conversations that came up in that is that based upon various structures, student groups, or conversations within the community, reference some of the historical coffee and conversations or something like that, there's a space for a variety of perspectives, and in our community talked about appreciating allowing their perspectives to be brought forth, and that there's generally a feeling of board and administration and a variety of staff that are willing to listen and engage, and that varied based upon how they engaged, but that came up, and that there's been a lot of renewed energy and excitement this school year. So that was another kind of sub theme that came up in that school climate and culture. I forgot to mention earlier. It ran over to a second page. So wanted to make sure I add that. There's a lot of positives too that came from these conversations. Last one is graduation date. So due to scheduling, what we caught in our calendar is that the current graduation date, which I think was set for June 9th, is after the contract time of a majority of our staff. And so we are proposing to move that graduation date to Thursday, June 8th versus Friday, June 9th, and use June 9th as a potential rain date. But we wanted to make sure that we would have the majority of our staff on contract, that we could have them participate in that opportunity versus staff being off contract. And we all know staff are like in vacation mode for the summer. So we want to make sure that we can balance that too. So the last day, now it will be June 8th. We will work on communications out and changing of calendars as well to reflect that, with June 9th being a backup date. A lengthier one this evening, Chair Nelson, but that is my superintendent report.
Thank you for the thoroughness and for reporting out on all of those listening sessions. Mm-hmm. Are there any administrative reports this evening from anybody present? Okay, we'll move on to board reports. Ariana, may I start with you?
Thank you.
Yes.
We wrapped up quarter one at the high school last week, and we're just getting started with quarter two today. Student council is still very busy at the high school, and last month we actually had a great opportunity to help out with the Halloween Community Festival at Twin Oaks Middle School, and we were able to help out with fun games for kids to enjoy and dress up in fun costumes, so it was fun to see all the different costumes kids came up with. And in addition, in the first week of November, so last weekend, 8 members from Student Council had the opportunity to attend a fall conference where they went up to Cragun's Resort in Brainerd. And here they met with many other councils around the state. They shared new ideas and bonded. It was a great way for us to learn new techniques that different councils use and different ways that they operate, and as well as fun leadership skills. So that was a great opportunity for us to go up there. And throughout the month of November, our special events committee is working hard on our No Shave November fundraiser for men's health organizations. And all of our council is also starting to plan our winter dance, which will be held in early February. This week, actually, to kick off the start of Q2 and winter planning, Student Council is attending our annual Coffee House retreat, where the day is kind of dedicated to planning our plans for the winter dance, discussing things we want to change, or how we want things to run in the future for our winter dance. So we'll be able to split up into our winter committees, and these are similar to our homecoming committees, which include coronation, pet fest, pancake breakfast, there's an in-school dodgeball tournament, and of course our winter dance, which is usually on a Saturday evening. So I know our council members are looking forward to that. It's a fun day that we look forward to every year. And then lastly, aside from student council, this past month, there was a Heritage and Culture Festival held at Twin Oaks, where many different cultures were celebrated and honored in our community. And this was a great way for students and adults to kind of learn about different cultures in our community, and I know a lot of people enjoyed this, so yes. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know a number of students presented or man booths or personed booths at that as well. So thank you for that. Other school board director reports this evening.
I do have some things to report out on.
Thank
so
you.
Last week I attended the AMSD conference. I listened to three different breakout sessions or speakers. Two had to do with mental health, and so the state of our students, which was hard to listen to, but the data was also 6 to 12 months old because of reporting, so that kind of took me back in time a little bit. The second to do with mental health had to do around the legislative action from the executive director of NAMI. So really, they're advocating for fewer barriers to workforce, to be able to have clinicals outside of clinical walls, like in schools, enforcing mental health parity with physical health, different grants, increasing rates. One stat that stuck with me is that dental assistants get paid more than licensed clinical social workers. Telecom fee for 988, which is like 911, but being able to text with that, so adding that feature. Adding a mental health lead in the Department of Education, and then network adequacy, so really trying to work with healthcare to open up networks for mental health for kids. The third speaker, it was actually a group of speakers from Eastern Carver County, and the theme was racial harm, and it was very relevant, of course, given what our district has been through, and they went through a consent decree that 2018-19, I think, was when it came in, and went through their best practices and what they're doing now. They had their assistant superintendent, their communications director, their one of the APs at the high school who's super knowledgeable and helped kind of build this whole process, and it was very, really well done and really informative. Next couple of weeks, we'll be going to the MSBA Delegate Assembly. We had our curriculum committee meeting earlier today, the District Curriculum Advisory Committee, which you touched on a few of those things that we'll be bringing forward at the next board meeting. So that if you want.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
Or not, because it'll be on our agenda anyways.
No, Amy and I attended the District Curriculum Advisory Committee meeting, soon to be the Teaching and Learning, and there's some additional very good changes that that the Director of Teaching and Learning will be bringing and formalizing for review at our next session.
Other board reports?
Yes, so from Southwest Metro, we're currently working through evaluating 4 different consultants for strategic planning purposes. So we've had a couple of different sessions come up so that we could hear from each one of them and make a determination on which one will be the consultant. So decisions coming soon, most likely at our November meeting, which is tomorrow. Their online program, similar to Laker Online, is growing. I believe they have 500 students who have registered and are participating in programming through that. So that's wonderful to see. Similar to what we have going on here within Prairie Lake Savage area schools, they're also hurting for para and special ed para support. Just looking at the most recent report, 7 paras have chosen to leave the profession. 3 ended up taking other positions within the district that were non-para related. So that shortage is quite real, especially with respect to special education. One of the committees I sit on is the Southwest Metro Education Foundation, which is similar to the Laker Education Foundation. We're going through some, we'll call it some growing pains there, restructuring what the roles and responsibilities are for the governing board for the Southwest Metro Education Foundation, as well as the executive director, and then working on more fundraising so that we can keep that program vital and alive. The Southwest Metro Education Foundation, similar to Laker Education Foundation, funds grants for teachers for different programs that are not quite within scope of the standard general fund or how we fund activities. It also provides scholarship opportunities for students that are looking to go into the workforce, looking for 2-year vocational training, or looking to go to college. This is kind of that outlet for them to be able to afford to do that when they're essentially self-funded. So a lot of good things happening, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to turn it around.
Enrique, I've got a question for you. Did they hold their annual fundraiser this past year? Because I didn't see it advertised.
Did not, no. So yeah, the gala is typically the top fundraising event of the year, and the last couple of years with the pandemic made it really challenging. We have a number of foundations that provide support for us, but the gala was really the #1 fundraising opportunity. Shout out for the Cultural and Heritage Festival. That was outstanding. A lot of great performances. Especially appreciated going to one of the booths and having my name written for me in Pashto. That was really cool. Might be the next tattoo. We'll see. In case I forget my name and I'm in Afghanistan and somebody decides to return me to wherever I'm from. So that's it.
Other board reports?
No, I will just say I attended the Heritage, and it was great. It was just it was wonderful turnout. It was great to see all different cultures, wonderful dancing, and a lot of things different, but a lot of things very similar too. So it was really cool. Great to talk to the students too.
I attended the cultural festival too, and I actually manned one of the tables, playing a traditional Mexican game of loteria and teaching the kids how to do that. So that was a lot of fun, but it was wonderfully put together. A lot of, a huge shout out goes to Sam Oak and the Rotary E&I committee who put it together from scratch. And hopefully this will be an annual tradition. It was a lot of fun.
I will just echo that it was a fabulous day. I went for a couple hours in the morning, ran to get some lunch, and decided to come back and spend the rest of the day there. Great turnout. Love seeing the student-led booths there, representing different cultures, through food, through activities, through sharing, through writing. I also got my name written in several different languages that I look forward to framing and putting on the wall. And huge shout out to Mary, to the Rotary, Dr. Thomas, Sam Oak. We had great news coverage there. And what I really love is it just seems to be there's this building momentum of collaboration within our community to continue to celebrate the things that are different about us in a positive way. And I hope that momentum continues. It's been going on for a while now, and this was just one more example. And I heard several enthusiastic, this is first annual event coming to a close. So I think that's implying the second annual will be following up, probably with a much larger turnout as well. So thank you to everyone who participated. I also attended not the AMSD conference. Unfortunately, I got ill for that. But on November 4th, they had their board meeting, and in addition to talking about legislative issues, they primarily focused on presenters from Forbes Solution, and they presented to us, Together We Make a Difference, Lifting Student Voice, and they tied that back to some direction given by the Minnesota State High School League back in February about racist events that were happening at sporting events, racial, religious, and sexual harassment, and its unacceptability in schools, creating safe, supportive school environments, and committing to ensure that everybody has a safe environment. So they talked to us about how they're traveling around the state, working with student groups, and using sort of a World Cafe approach to create safe spaces so that they could get the students to ask some critical questions and then come up with answers themselves to bring forward to address some of these things. And this effort is supported by several organizations from MSBA to Minnesota State High School League, AMSD, Forbes Solutions, C, et cetera. So a lot of momentum behind that. We also had our first of the year Equity and Excellence Committee meeting, and it was a time to kind of regroup and do some small group work and do reporting out on some key issues and thoughts as we move forward with that committee work going onward. And I had the fortunate opportunity to serve lunch at Lola Delago again. And just another shout out to child nutrition staff for the way they love our kids. But I have to say, I would say 98% of the kids who come through, please, thank you, may I, just the most polite behaviors. The students in our buildings are just at every level are amazing, but just to be there serving food. I was there for Halloween, so it was kind of fun, and I wore my witch's hat, and one student unfortunately got a little nervous and said, "Can you tell me if the food is poisoned today?" So, but a shout out to everybody there. So, any other board reports I've missed? All right. Future events are as follows. We will be canvassing election results on November 18th here at DSC at 7:30 a.m. There's no school, grades E through 12, November 23rd through 25th, and all buildings will be closed. Board study session here at 6 p.m. on November 28th. In a moment, I'll be taking a motion for adjournment, but we will be transitioning to closed session, and the meeting will be closed in accordance with the open meeting law, Minnesota Statute 13D.03, for the purpose of discussing negotiation strategies. So at this time, could I take a motion? I would take a motion to adjourn this meeting and transition to closed.
So made.
By Mary and Stacy. Stacy.
Sure.
Second.
Yeah, good. I made it, and then she's.
Mary. Okay, all in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries 7-0. All right.